7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Project Egg Show. I'm your host, Ben Gothard, and today I'm coming to you from Vancouver in Canada. Now, I'm so excited because it's the first time I've been to Canada. First of all, my friend Kevin, shout out to you, pal, was very gracious enough to share his space with us today. So thank you so much for that, Kevin. And today we have the honor of speaking with Joe Magnotti with Empire Flippers. Joe, how the heck are you?
Good, man. Good. Coming to you from Manila, Philippines. So I'm on the other side of the earth, but yeah, Vancouver's a beautiful city and happy to be here.
Yes. And so I'm so glad that you are. I'm so glad that you're able to take time and carve time out of your schedule. I know you have a lot of things going on, a lot of irons in the fire. So thank you very much for that. Let's jump right in, man. Got a quick question for you.
Sure.
What is your story?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the meat and potatoes of the story is I was an engineer back in the day in the kind of San Francisco startup scene in the 90s. Then got into the mortgage business in the 2000s, and then outsourcing and SEO in the later 2000s. Came to the Philippines in 2009 to run the outsourcing company. And had some setbacks, and we started building little websites, me and my business partner Justin Cook, and we started selling those sites on an auction-based platform that wasn't very good, honestly. And we started getting a lot of people coming to us and kind of asking, "Hey, don't sell those anymore on the auction platform. Just sell them directly." And we'd go ahead. We would sell those directly. We had a podcast and a blog. It was called AdSense Flippers at the time. And then sellers started coming to us and saying, "Hey, you guys are getting great multiples. Yeah, we really like your process. Can we sell through you guys as well?" And that was kind of a light bulb moment. We said, why don't we create a marketplace? That was like 2012. Rename the company to Empire Flippers and stop making our own sites. Just started connecting buyers and sellers through our marketplace. So yeah, I mean, that's really the relevant information behind Empire Flippers. I mean, if you want to know more about me, I'm a poker player, a sports guy, and I love living in Asia and living in the Philippines. I'm originally from New York. But yeah, I've been there for quite some time.
Why engineering?
Well, I would say as a young guy, I really wanted to build stuff. And the idea that I would be able to build systems or software with computers back in the 90s was really appealing to me. It wound up not working out that way. I haven't written a piece of code in more than 20 years. And even, my first couple of jobs were really like a sales architect type role where I was doing account management, working with people, because that's really where my skill sets lies. It's not with writing code or being a traditional engineer. It's more business, managing people, working with people, sales, that kind of thing. But it was nice to get that technical background.
Why did you like to build stuff? Where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly where it came from, but I just always had it in me that having something that you could look back on and kind of say, I did that, was always a philosophy that interested me. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. He had a furniture store. So that was interesting to me.
Did you spend a lot of time with him when you were
Yeah, we used to spend a lot of time together. I lived with my grandparents when I was young. So, they were much more like my parents than my parents, but yeah.
That must have been an amazing experience to be exposed to entrepreneurship at such a young age.
Yeah, I mean, say it was. I think there were pluses and minuses, and I probably overlooked the minuses being so young and not really understanding things, which is another reason why engineering was appealing, because you would think, well, a traditional job and the security of having an engineering job that's never going to go away. And, kind of, you have like doctors, lawyers, engineers is like that third thing that your family would love to see you go into and be successful at. But once I got into, having a job in my 20s, I hated it. I just hated it. I hated having a boss. I hated them dictating when I could work, what I was going to work on, what were my goals, all that kind of stuff. And it took me a good 10 years to realize that I just really needed to be my own boss and create my own company.
What were what were some of the things specifically that you did not like about having a job?
Well, I mean, number one is just answering to somebody else. I think that, freedom is one of my number one philosophies in life. It's something that I hold dear, and it's very, very important to me. Giving up my freedom for whatever reason is just off the table. So I think that was a huge part of it. When you start to realize that, extremely wealthy people really work for themselves or own a business, it's very rare to meet an extremely wealthy person who had a 9-to-5 job. And when I say extremely wealthy, I mean, multimillionaire. It happens, but most of the time, those people either are business people or, some sort of high level deal maker. And when I started to realize that is when, between the freedom and the financial gain, I started to realize that, having my own business was really the only way to go for me.
So you mentioned freedom being like one of your core philosophies, that it's just like a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Is a word that I like to use. How did you discover that freedom was that important to you? Because I mean, I feel like a lot of us can sense when something's being taken away, but it may sometimes be hard to articulate it in the first place. So how did you really identify that freedom was that important to you?
Yeah, I think, when I was in my later 20s and I started to see a lot of people going down the script of life, right? You know, they had the job, they had, they were getting married, they were going to have kids, they were just going to work at this place for 20 years. And it was just kind of all dictated out for them. And really, they didn't have much choice at that point. And I saw that in people that were older than me, and I said, that's not going to be me. That's scary to me. And that sort of, having some sort of predestined life path that you really just can't choose or modify, is not something I want. And that's when I realized that, freedom was just really, really huge.
I love that. And I was actually talking to somebody very near and dear to me lately about the difference between living a life like a life of choice, versus that nihilistic, almost it doesn't matter what I do, predetermined philosophy.
Mhm.
And we were talking about it through the lens of the words that we choose to use, right? Like for example, instead of saying, Tommy made me angry, the which I believe is kind of a victim mentality of saying I chose to be angry based on Tommy's actions,
Mhm.
right? And so I think a lot of that is a very tied together in wanting freedom and wanting to have control, or at least as much control over ourselves as we can. Do you think about that kind of stuff? Like, do you go really granular and get really deep in the weeds there? Or is it something that you just know that it's important to you, so it almost doesn't matter how you look into it or define it?
Yeah, I mean, I remember a specific, I was on the way to work. I think I must have been like 27 or 28. I was like on the bus, And I like looked outside the bus, and there was this like older couple. They must have been in their 50s, and they're like in their beautiful BMW, and they're obviously commuting to work. And they just looked miserable. And I said to myself, that's not going to be me. And I don't know the specifics of how I'm going to get there. And, I don't know how I'm going to figure it out, but I'm going to figure it out. And that I think is having some general principles that you can live by and stick to is more important than the minute details, because the day to day is going to fluctuate, right? You have to have that like overall goal that you're moving towards, and definitely one of those for me is freedom, both financially and logistically. I want to be able to go and live wherever I want. I want to be able to not have to work in an office. I'm here in my home in Manila, but I could work at a coffee shop. I could work from Cambodia. I could go to, South America. I could go back to the United States, wherever I want. And I think that's pretty huge.
I think so too. And I actually think it's interesting to see how our society is moving towards a very remote centric workforce
I,
where everybody wants to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think in 20 years this will be the norm. In 20 years, everybody, technology will have come far enough that you can virtually be, be like a holographic style Star Wars or Star Trek type stuff, and it won't just be Zoom like this. Like we could actually be on the couch next to each other, using our VR helmets or something like that. I think once you get to that sort of level, there's no reason why people should commute anymore. And you look at a place like Manila or LA or Sao Paulo, Brazil, where the traffic is just out of control. I mean, you can't go anywhere without it spending 2 hours in a car. So yeah, I feel like Empire Flippers is on the forefront of that revolution, and it's something that's very important to our goals. That doesn't mean that sometimes we need an office. When we bring on a good deal of people, we might like rent a Regis office or something like that, get everybody together and do training. We have company meetups twice a year. The next one's in Phuket, Thailand. The last one was in Mexico City. So, we're able to have those kind of everywhere and have a little fun, but also work together. But in general, the philosophy is, hey, you can live and work from anywhere. And that's really important to us.
I love that. Why did you say 20 years? What about that? Was that just kind of like a general, like roughly 20 years, or was there some sort of calculation behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I just think if you look at where technology was 20 years ago and where it's at now, I could definitely see that keeping up, and where society is too, right? Like if I think about 1999 versus 2019, like the things that were acceptable in 1999 from a social level and from a work perspective, a corporate perspective, and what's acceptable now. I mean, a lot of companies are doing partial remote work or days where, people can work from home. I mean, back in the 90s, you maybe had flex time where you could come in like an hour later and leave an hour earlier or something like that. But the idea of being able to work remotely was just out of the question. Even the best San Francisco cool internet companies weren't doing that back then. So yeah, I just think based on my life experience and how fast technology is due to rise over the next 20 years, plus societal changes and more accepting of these kind of what would be considered outlandish years ago, I think 20 years is a good measuring stick.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see what it's actually going to look like, because I kind of envision the VR thing being big too, where everybody's sitting wherever they are in their home. You put on the VR thing and it's like you're in a virtual office.
Right.
So that would totally reduce all overhead. I mean, you might have to get VR setups for your people, but you
Yeah.
could have like this remote space where you can almost build it'd be much easier to build culture because everybody's more relaxed and they're in their own they're in their own space, but then you can create this shared space. I think that's going to be phenomenal. And like, even for something like a podcast or an interview, you know, we could like customize the space to the guest, you know, or the situation. Like, we could be sitting, you know, sitting in the forest in Canada with some huge waterfalls behind us, and it'd be
Right.
totally cool.
Yeah, and you could have, virtual camera angles from anywhere, right? You could do all this kind of cool stuff. I mean, I think we were talking before the call about, video and audio. I do a lot of audio podcasting because it's highly editable. But even when I do an audio podcast, I want the video camera turned on, so I have these video cues, because when you're talking to somebody, looking them in the eye is so important. So, I think we're only going to be doing more and more of that. And in the future, video calls will be the norm, and virtual video calls will probably be the norm as well.
It's amazing what technology has allowed us to do.
It is. And I think we're very lucky to live at this time versus other times, because, yeah, I mean, the idea of going to an office every day, like, it just thinking about it, I get a little twinge in my stomach where I'm like a little sick, you know?
Oh, dude, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like, it's almost like an inner fire. It's just
Mm.
like, no, absolutely not. Like, I do not want to be stuck in one spot. Like, I don't want to be geographically bound anywhere. I mean, this is the first time I've ever been to Canada, and I really wasn't planning this very far ahead, but we're still able to do the show. We're still able to do all the things we want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of going back to Cubeville, it scares me so much that it motivates me, even at this level, to make sure that my business is well aligned for the future and doing well. And I think that having a little bit of that fear is a good thing. But yeah, the other thing is just having a business that allows you to work from anywhere, right? You have to be able to build that sort of business, or potentially buy that sort of business that kind of puts you in the driver's seat from the beginning. And I think a lot of people, when they first start building or designing some sort of business, they don't think about that, and they just say, "Oh, I just want an income stream. I just wanted to make a profit," right? And by the time they start making a good profit, they realize the mistakes they made early on were instrumental, and now they've basically, put themselves into a job. And I think, especially when you use other people's money or leverage, whatever you want to call it, you're going to be answerable to those people at the end of the day. And look, everybody has a little bit of a boss. Our clients are sure that kind of thing. But, Justin and I own the business 50-50. We don't have any debt, any investors. And that's really huge. It's almost invaluable, because having a business of this size that we own completely is very nice.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I love what you were talking about, when you said that people don't think about the type of business that they're building
Yeah.
until it's almost too late. Because and I totally have done this with past businesses that have failed, where I built something and I didn't think about, okay, once I get it, then where am I going to be? Because I feel like a lot of people underestimate what they can do. So like they start something and they just try it, and then they figure out, oh wow, I'm actually like, I can do this. Like, it is possible for me to do this. And they get there and they're like, oh wait, this isn't what I wanted. But if they took the time to think, okay, assuming whatever I try is going to be successful, is that actually where I want to be? Is that
Yeah.
actually what I want to be doing?
Yeah, and with businesses, I think it's pretty important. Like, we see people buy franchises like a 7-Eleven, and there's nothing wrong with that. But typically, those tend to be people who want to be their own boss, and they've got some money together, but not a lot of money, and they know they can buy a 7-Eleven franchise for less than $100,000, let's say. And the issue becomes they buy it and then they start to realize that, yeah, I have employees for most of the shifts, but I can't afford to hire employees for all the shifts. So that means I have to actually work at the 7-Eleven. So they've essentially bought themselves a job at 7-Eleven, usually working like the night shift or something that nobody else will work. And that's not freedom in my book. That's really locking you into something where if you bought or built an online business that was truly online all the way from the ground up, that provides a lot more personal freedom than you're ever going to get with a 7-Eleven.
Now, I do have some friends who own 7-Elevens, and I'm so glad that y'all do. And, y'all know who you are, and you've definitely taken good care of me when I've come to visit you there. So thank you for that. But I want to talk a little bit more about those principles, about your principles. We've talked a little bit about freedom, but you've mentioned there that that's one of more than one. So what are those other ones? And I'd really like to drill down into them.
Yeah, I mean, my 3 personal principles are freedom, and when I say freedom, I mean true personal freedom. Not having geographical ties, and not being stuck in kind of things that you don't want to do, whether that's work or personal relationships. A second, I would say, is financial. Not just financial freedom, but being financially successful. Look, I don't want or need a Ferrari. In fact, I don't even drive. I've probably driven 3 times in the last 10 years. Like literally, when I moved to Asia, I just stopped driving. I take taxis and now with Uber and Grab everywhere in the world, I don't need that. But having enough financial success that I could buy that kind of thing is nice, right? And I think spending your money on experiences and being able to afford those experiences is a big thing. There's a lot of philosophy out there. I'm a little bit of a minimalist. Like, I don't dress up in 3-piece suits and have a lot of expensive tastes. But at the same time, I want to be able to afford nice experiences. And I think, the kind of, I hate to call him out, but the Mr. Money Mustache sort of philosophy of, yeah, just save and retire at 38. Like, I don't want to do that. I want to have a good income my entire life and be able to work on something that's cool, that provides a very high income level so that I'm motivated to keep doing that. Because honestly, if I retired, I don't know what I would do with my free time. Like, I don't want to do salsa dancing, every day. I want to work on a business that provides freedom and financial success. And then the third kind of principle that I have is around health. I'm 44. I could probably stand to lose 20 pounds, but I'm in pretty good shape for a 44-year-old. So
I love that. Now, one thing that you said that really stuck out to me was that you prefer to spend your money on experiences.
yeah,
I not only completely agree with that philosophy, like a million percent, but my whole family is kind of like that. I mean, we very much value family time, and I'm Jewish, and so I feel like culturally, um, a lot of Jewish people are very similar.
Mhm.
And my grandpa, he his one of his favorite things to do, when he was a little bit younger, was to get the whole family to go to like a dude ranch in Wyoming and all come together and ride horses and be in the mountains and go hiking and do all that fun stuff. And that to me is so much more meaningful than getting a sweet new, uh I don't even know, like a sweet new phone or
yeah.
some new cool thing. And so yeah, I just how did you come to that realization? How did you develop that mindset?
Well, I mean, I'd say my family was definitely more object oriented. My dad used to lease a new car every couple of years, probably, something that he shouldn't be doing financially. My extended family would very rarely take trips. I think once we went to Florida when I was a kid. It was like the biggest trip in the world. And you still look at my family now, and most of them have not left New York ever. So that's a very like New York thing to do. Like, why would you leave New York? We're the center of the universe, right? And buying a house and getting a car and keeping up with the Joneses, I think is a very American thing to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's fine if that's what you want to do, but it comes at a cost, a very high cost. And especially when you got those monthly payments, like, what are you going to do? I mean, you're in debt, you got monthly payments, and now you're kind of stuck. And so, when I got out of school, I had a large amount of student debt, and it took me a long time to pay it off. And I was like, I'm going to really try to cut down on that kind of stuff. And when I moved to Asia, I was able to get a more basic life and really have a high standard of living for a lower dollar amount. And I've upgraded my life significantly since I first moved here, but still the dollar value that I get is incredible. I mean, the kind of lifestyle that I live to do this in New York would be not impossible, but it would cost 5 times, maybe 10 times as much. And I just think that that goes a long way to the bottom line.
When you were in your late 20s,
Mm-hmm.
and you had that experience with those two people in the BMW, I believe you said,
Yeah.
and you were like, this is just so not, like you just realized that this was not where you wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
This is not what you wanted to be doing. What steps did you take initially? Like, what was and we talked about it a little bit, but what were the first things that you did to be like, all right, I'm taking the plunge, I'm making the leap, I'm doing it, bam, 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 bam.
Yeah, I mean, at that point it was just kind of an idea in the back of my head, and I was trying to look for ways to get around that. I got promoted in my company fairly quickly. I started asking for if I could work remotely. They had moved me to a New York office, and I got a couple of days a week to kind of work from home. But once that company went south, and I had to part ways with them, this was like 2001, around there. I moved back to California, and I started working in the mortgage business. And I did very, very well for a couple of years, but it was a high degree of burnout because, again, I wasn't my own boss. I wasn't doing all this stuff. And then, Justin and I had known each other quite some time at this time, 5 or 6 years. And, we both were going through the same struggle, and we decided to create our own business, a mortgage business. And this was after me taking some time off and traveling the world. I went to Brazil, I went to Italy, I went to Thailand in 2004. And I just realized that, man, if I could earn dollars, but spend pesos like they have here in the Philippines or whatever the local money is, like that value composition is awesome. So how do I do that? Like first I was trying like, oh, how about online poker or, like the things that everybody else tries. Justin tried like drop shipping watches on eBay and all these kind of things that are kind of like, they're not businesses, right? They're income streams at best. And at worst, you're really just having a job online. And that doesn't provide the sort of personal freedom or financial freedom that you need, because if you're not working, you're not earning money. And that's one of the worst things about poker, right? Is like, unless you're at the poker table, you're not earning money and you're potentially losing money. So through that experience of traveling a bit, seeing the disparity between what I could earn in sort of dollars and spend locally and still have a very good life, we kind of made it a goal, both Justin and I, to find a way to do this. And the only way we could think of doing it was by creating our own company. The first iteration, I mean, starting a mortgage business in late 2005 was a terrible idea because the financial crisis was right around the corner, and I hit the mortgage business first. And, we were out of business in less than 2 years. So, but that gave us a good taste of the freedom that we could have, because we ran the mortgage business out of our own home in California, and we loved it. And so once we got jobs, we went back to work for another company. We still had the goal in mind to create something that was our own. And we created an outsourcing company based on people here in the Philippines, and doing projects for SEO companies back in America. But still, it had the problem of it required an office for people to work from. It was very client driven in that, you'd have one client who had 5 agents with you, another client that had 10, and maybe this guy wanted to go from 10 to 8, and then you'd have to find another project to make up for that. And it had a lot of problems in that business as well. But it was a great learning experience for us, and it led us to what eventually became Empire Flippers, where we were able to design it from the ground up as a remote business with no office, no centralized control like that. That wasn't very dependent on one client, right? It's more broad and scaled out so that we don't have to worry about that. And it's based on internet marketing, where, we can use our content, the podcast, the blog, we use paid traffic, we use all these other sort of streams to get new business. And that was a huge step in the right direction. But it took a lot of failure to get there. It just does.
I'm so glad that the conversation has gone this route, because I feel like so many people, they may look at where you are now and be like, I could never do that. I could never do the incredible things that Joe's doing right now. But I love the fact that you talked about, you had a job and then you tried, and then you had to go back and get another job, and you tried again, and you tried again, and you tried again, and then you found the right thing for you, the thing that is perfect for you. And I think that is just that's the way to do it, right? Like, you do what you need to do, and you try as many times as you need to try to get what you want. And it's not, can I do it? It's like, how can I do it? Like, how do I do it? How many times am I willing to just get back up and just go back at it again? How many freaking times am I willing to go back and get a job and make that money to try again? And, like, to me, the answer is as many times as it freaking takes.
Yeah. I mean, it's about iterations, right? I mean, one of my early iterations on this problem was to take what's called mini retirements, which I think is something that actually Tim Ferriss suggested in his book. But that wasn't until 2007. I had the mini retirement idea like in 2001, I think, or something like that. The problem with mini retirements is you start to wind down, right? And working is like a muscle. It's like going to the gym. If you don't use it, you atrophied. So I would take these little mini retirements of 3 months and then try to go back and either get a job or start making money again. And I was so not used to it that it was very hard to get the motor cranking again. And so I realized that I have to design a work life that has a good balance for me, where I'm willing to work consistently and, throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year, and not have to take those long vacations. So I better have a work that meets up well and meshes well with my lifestyle, which is being able to live anywhere, being able to dictate my own schedule, choosing what the direction is of the company and the goals are of the company. I want to be able to do that. I don't want to have somebody else dictating those rules to me.
I love that. I also think it's so fascinating that a lot of things in today's day and age are getting decentralized.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we've seen it with
Crypto
blockchain,
and
crypto, and working remotely. And I'm so fascinated by it,
Mhm.
just that phenomenon. I think partially because I just don't know that much about it. But I'm, I kind of see it, and it's interesting to me. Where do you think that's going to go? Right? Because I feel like we're very centralized, and now we're moving towards decentralization. And what I would imagine would be we're probably going to go like way to the other side and probably have to bounce back a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, what do you see as the future of decentralization?
Well, there's a great book on that called Holacracy. I don't know the author off the top of my head, but I suggest you look it up and link to it in the show notes later on. It is a great book about how to set up a corporation on a decentralized philosophy. From having a constitution to you basically build circles, and the circles have levels of responsibility around that, and then you have tactical meetings or governing meetings that dictate what the circle is responsible for, and circles can interact through links and be kind of circles within circles, that kind of stuff. I'm not sure that I'm willing to adapt that philosophy for my company. It would make me have to give up a lot of control, which is kind of scary for me. Because one of the reasons why I built it this way is so Justin and I would be in control of the entire business. But yeah, that book has an interesting philosophy that may be, like you said, a little bit way too out there. But I suggest people to read it, take it in, and if things can get organized like this, it's probably better in the long run, because when you have a very strict hierarchy like an army, the problem is that so much of the leadership is centralized that if the leader is unavailable or does make a bad decision, it really has a huge impact on the organization. And if you can find a way to decentralize stuff and have people make decisions that honestly they probably are better off making them themselves because they know the work, that's powerful.
I also think there's the option or the chance, and I think this happens a lot actually, that in a very centralized system,
Mhm.
there's a lot of like a lot of politics that go on there. And so you may have somebody that's put into the leadership position that should not be in that leadership position, but they have such direct control over everything else that they're a bad leader at the top, and that messes up everything.
Yeah.
That messes up everything.
I think, look, politics, unfortunately, is something that you're just never going to get away from. Whenever you put a group of humans together, there's going to be some level of politicking. And to say that you are going to try to remove that is now you're in utopia, fanciful, paradise land. That's just not going to happen. But if you can control and understand that level of politics and say to people what's acceptable and what's not, I think that is very powerful, and that's what you should try to look to do. Because just trying to wipe it out is bad, but you don't want cancers either, right? I mean, we've definitely had it in our organization where we've had to remove people because they were doing too much of that politicking, and we're not going to have that. That's one of our philosophies, is we don't allow that.
Let's talk about poker.
Okay.
Why do you like poker so much, and how did you get into that state of mind?
Grandfather taught me poker and craps when I was a kid. I mean, I learned to play when I was like 7. So, been playing for a long time. Used to play in college a lot. And then when I started traveling, I started playing online, when the Moneymaker thing happened in 2001. I don't know if you know a lot about poker, but Chris Moneymaker was like one of the first real sort of amateurs to win the World Series of Poker. And I had some poker experience playing live. And then after he won, I started playing online a bit in the early 2000s. And then, like I said before, I thought it was one of the first things that I could kind of do remotely. It's a lot of people get into this lifestyle, and that's one of the first things they try before they realize some of the downfalls of it. And then in the later 2000s, before I left for Asia, I started playing live again because they had made online poker illegal in the United States, and a lot of the online players started going to play live. I had a lot of live experience, and man, it was just easy to clean up for them because they had no idea or sort of how to play live. They couldn't keep themselves from fidgeting. They couldn't, keep themselves from giving stuff away or being bored. It was just, it was very easy at that time, I would say in the 2007 area, when that happened. But yeah, I love poker. Manila is a great poker town. They have good casinos here and great poker rooms. It's like chess for money, really, if you get into it. And I think it's good to keep your brain working on different stuff like that. And so it's pretty good.
I love poker. Let me just throw that out there.
Okay.
And within my family, every once in a while we'll get together and we'll have poker tournaments, and those are so much fun, and we get so competitive with each other.
Right.
Like, you're going down, but I still love you because you're my family. And I feel like there are probably a lot of things that we can learn from really high level poker, right?
Yeah.
I would love to learn your thoughts on that and what some of those things are.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say especially if online poker and live poker, I'd say they're the same game with the same rules, but they're played very differently. The online game is more of a math game. Especially if you have like a lot of statistics and a heads up display and a lot of information on the players, you can make math decisions long term. The live game, which is actually what I prefer, is more of a people's game, because you really have to know the person, and you have to get to know the person kind of quickly and get to know their philosophy on how they play. And a lot of times how people play poker is how they look at life, and I think that that's more interesting to me, because it becomes a social game instead of just, what basically two robots could do, over the internet. Now it's sort of like you have to interact with them, ask them questions, get to talk to them, know them a little bit. Like, I think that that's a lot more interesting to me. And it teaches you a lot about life, I think. And it's a good skill to learn. I encourage people to go out and try to learn, really how to learn poker, not just because you could make a little money on it and it's a good hobby, but because of the social interaction and what it teaches you about people.
You mentioned before that even when you were an engineer, a lot of what you did and a lot of where your skill set was really centered around was working with people.
Yeah.
What, like, how are you so good at working with people? What makes you so strong at that?
Well, I mean, I think you grew up in an Italian family, and like arguing and discussing things and being in a group setting is very, very normal. When I went to college, I quickly realized that I was not even in the top half of the smartest people in the room. You start to see these people that are just like savants at physics or, very complicated calculus. And you're like, I don't even know how to do it. But then, it's like to go talk to a girl, they just have no idea what to say. And fortunately, I kind of had that upbringing where social interaction was very, very common for me. And I think that made it a lot easier. And then I just realized I couldn't depend on my smarts because this wasn't that smart, and once you start to realize that, you say, well, where are your skill sets? And if it's with people, then that's what you should stick with. And once I learned sales in the mortgage business, I really learned how to sell, and especially how to sell on the phone. That was a key turning point for me, because now I said to myself, oh, I thought salespeople were you had to be born a salesperson. If you're not born a salesperson, you're not going to be good at sales. Bullshit. You can learn how to be a salesperson. It can be taught to you. And with the right sort of dedication, script, and hard work ethic, I mean, you can sell almost anything, and almost anyone can learn to do that.
So first of all, I just want to say to those super hyper intelligent people, who are struggling with the girl thing, I just want to offer one piece of advice. All you need to do is just look at that individual. And by the way, this goes for whoever you like, regardless of the sex. You just look them in the eye and you smile at them. And if they smile back, then you can go talk to them. And
Yeah.
it's all good. If they don't smile back, I would probably not try to force that one. So
Yeah.
I just want to throw that out there for you.
Yeah. I mean, right. It's a bit of a numbers game too.
Oh yeah.
You can't, just like sales, you can't expect to be successful every time. And I think dealing with rejection is something you have to get over in both sales and in love. And if you can do that, then you'll be a lot happier in life, because there's a lot of rejection in life. There's a lot of that. And you just kind of have to pick yourself up and move on rather than dwell on what could have been.
Exactly. And hopefully you don't stress out about your closing ratio in the love section.
Right.
You really only need one.
You really only need one. It's true. I mean, if you have 100 failures and one success, you're a lot better than the guy who's, or if you're just 1 for 1. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? So very true.
So Joe, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the things you learned in the business world, because I think you have a really interesting perspective. And then we'll wrap it up pretty soon. I want to be very respectful of your time. So working with businesses all the time, having started multiple businesses of your own, some not being as successful and some being very successful. And then the business that you're in now, I mean, you see businesses all the time. You're connecting people around businesses. What are some of the biggest takeaways that are the biggest lessons learned that you've gotten from seeing and being exposed to all these different businesses?
Yeah, well, the nice thing about seeing a bunch of businesses is it definitely scratches my entrepreneurial itch, right? I mean, without having to start these businesses, I get to see all these kind of unique business models and ways to make money. And that's, one of the things I think your audience should take away from this is there's a lot of ways to make money out there on the internet that are, totally virtual sort of businesses. I mean, just go to our marketplace and check it out, and you'll be amazed at the different types of business models out there. But yeah, I mean, I would say the main takeaway here is that, there are 2 different types of philosophies. There's the build and there's the buy, right? And there's pluses and minuses on both sides. And really it comes down to whether you are willing to kind of jump start the build process and go into the buy process because your time is just too valuable. And, we find a lot of people who are time strapped, but, cash is not a problem for them, especially with the economy being so well. And those people would probably do well to skip the build phase, because the build phase is going to take you a year to really get something in line. And that's something you need to consider, I think. And for those of you who have a lot more time than money, that definitely go the build route, because you'll get that sort of skill set that you need to be successful with other businesses that you may wind up buying in the future, and that won't be wasted time.
I love that. Last question for you, and this is a very personal question. Um, I'm not sure if I mentioned, but I'm 24 years old, and so I really want to know from my perspective, what question should I be asking you, and specifically you, that I just wouldn't think to ask?
What question should you ask me that you shouldn't think to ask? I don't know. I guess, maybe something about how you persevered, because look, there's going to be a lot of trials and tribulations in life. And I think, something that I wish I could have said to my younger self was, it's going to be okay. It's all going to work out. And If I had known that, maybe I would have been a lot calmer and a lot less anxiety in my life. And so, yeah, the one question I would say is just, how do you get through it? How do you get through these sort of down times and bad times? And the answer is very simple: is just you have to pick yourself up. You have to kind of say, the past is the past. What's done is done. All I can control is, the future. In some respects, you can't even control the future. But and that's kind of the best life philosophy to have in general, is just working through that.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing everything that you have. It's truly been an honor from my end to be able to share this time with you. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, and you know, I also just want to take a second to acknowledge you for the work that you're doing, because I'm a very firm believer that
Mhm.
entrepreneurs and small business, we really are the backbone of the world's economy,
Right.
and we're the movers and shifters of this world, and we're the change agents and people who are doing a lot of good in this world. And you've built something that allows people to do that good, and you've removed a lot of the friction. And so the through you, so many more people have jobs, so many more people have businesses, they have their freedom back, they're allowed to, or they're able to contribute more to their local economies, to their countries, to the world. So I really just want to acknowledge you for the wonderful things that you're doing for this world, because frankly, I think we need a lot more people like you. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, thanks, Ben. I appreciate that. That's a very nice compliment. I don't know if I'm that nice of a guy, but yeah, just trying to do my best, and hope that we can stick to the kind of philosophies that I've come up with, and I enjoy it too. So, I mean, I think that if you can find a job that you enjoy, you can build a business that you enjoy, that gives you that sticks to your personal principles, then stuff like this becomes easy, and people are going to compliment you because that sort of formula and combination works well.
Awesome. Well, to everybody who's listening and watching, I want to thank y'all too. Your time is very valuable. And so I'm very appreciative that you would choose to share with us today. So thank you very much. And I will see y'all on the next episode.